listening to Breakfast with Ellie and Paul. It is 6:36. Let's take a look at the front pages.
Let's start with The Observer, and the Health Secretary Steve Barclay is urging trade unions to help him apply pressure on Rishi Sunak to get extra money for NHS staff.
The Sun leads with the London shooting. A 7-year-old is still fighting for life after being shot at a funeral.
The Independent claim a bitter split has emerged amongst Conservative plotters about how best to restore Boris Johnson as party leader.
And the Sunday Express reports a migrant worker claims to be the victim of a sexual assault during a riot at an immigration removal camp in Hillingdon.
Well, it's time to go through the papers now, and joining us this morning is political strategist and former advisor to Tony Blair, John McTiernan, and broadcaster and journalist Claire Muldoon. Good morning to both of you. Thank you so much for coming in for us. Claire, let's start with you, shall we?
Yep.
Quite a remarkable story. Health Secretary Steve Barclay is asking the unions to help him in applying pressure to Rishi Sunak to increase NHS wages.
Indeed, Ellie. This is a story that's covered quite a few pages in The Observer today, and I, for one, I'm a bit perplexed by it and a bit surprised. Steve Barclay we hadn't even heard of over the Christmas period, as everyone was, the nurses were striking, ambulance men striking, lots of the NHS workers on their knees because they weren't happy with pay and conditions within the NHS. And we thought, well, who is the government representative here? This man called Steve Barclay. Wow, who knew? And now, of course, he's just coming out of his shell. They had the meeting last Monday with Rishi, the Prime Minister, obviously, and we don't know what's happened. Suddenly, Andrea Gorton, the head of the unions, 14 unions she's chairing at the moment for the health service staff, has now said that there was a leak, and apparently now Steve Barclay is insisting. He's my new bezzer, BFF now, I think they refer to each other as. So they are, trying to get into cahoots and, going up to Jeremy Hunt, who's obviously the Chancellor, and Rishi, the Prime Minister, to say, look, let's pool our resources together. Let's give our PR. Let's give our costs. Please just let us for money. Rishi, Jeremy, what are you doing? Yeah. Give us the money that we need. But Steve Barclay is enlisting the help of the unions to try and make the case for them to get more money that they've been doing since before Christmas.
It's weird. John, you used to advise Tony Blair, former advisor to the Prime Minister. How would the Prime Minister feel if someone in his cabinet was kind of going to get... Yeah.
Every health secretary goes native.
Right.
No health secretary wants to fight the NHS. And you look at the polls say the ambulance drivers are being supported by the public, the nurses are being supported by the public, and now they're being supported by Steve Barclay too.
Yeah.
Because basically you become the health secretary. When Jeremy Hunt was the health secretary, he was after cash from the Chancellor. When he was the head of the Select Committee, he was after cash. And now it's only when it's the Chancellor he's going, there's no money. So I think, the Steve Barclay's trying to exploit the fact that he knows that Jeremy Hunt knows the problems in the health service, knows the money that's needed. But
to do it this publicly, to be in the Telegraph and a few other papers.
That's correct. Well, I mean, he's Steve. He's not running. He's not running, but he's trying to be popular.
I think what he's saying is, like, I can't actually do anything about it, so I'm going to open a can of worms here and just stand back. Yeah. Look, guys, it's not me. I've tried, but it's not.
Yeah. The last person to properly take on a strike in the health service was actually Ken Clarke, who in the 90s broke the ambulance worker strike. But he did that by just being tough and being clear, we're not dealing. And what Steve Barclay's done is he's admitted, we're going to do a deal. I'm on your side. Get off my back.
Do you think it is that public perception, that public support? I mean, I think it's over 60% of the public.
51% for nurses and
for nurses
the Observer poll.
Well, there you go. Yeah. Perfect. Is that what swayed it? Do you think he knows that the public would back him on this?
I reckon it's two things. I reckon it is that, and it is when he goes back to his constituency. All MPs go back at the weekend. He's got a hospital in his constituency. He'll be getting patients, doctors, nurses, mums, worried people who come to him with experiences of how it's been bad for them. And I think he gets that pressure too. The social pressure is very strong. Yeah. And Steve Barclay is in a seat which on paper is safe, but Labour are mounting a massive challenge there. Lots of young people moved out of London during the pandemic. It looks like a Labour target, and I think he's acting in that way.
It's funny you said always health secretaries. Why not the transport secretary? Why don't we see him saying, I've had a word with Mick Lynch and...
I always see the rail is privatised.
Yeah. Well, yeah, well, that's true.
Well, the real
but they often say that
are.
the government are pulling the strings in the background and they're the ones...
Oh, yeah, no, look,
Sorry, mandate the rail company.
No. So it's pretty clear. Whenever you see Mick Lynch on the telly, Mick knows the deal, and he's got to concede something. He's got to have driver-only operated trains. He's against it. His members are against it, and the Transport Secretary Grant Shapps just wants to give the rail companies to give the money, but not to give on productivity. There's such a clear productivity switch there, and Shapps has changed the nature of it. Shapps hasn't quite done beer and sandwiches, but he's given the impression too he'd like a deal. It's really in the centre in number 10 that Rishi Sunak's saying we've got to fight the unions, and all his ministers are kind of trying to settle, trying to find a way, take this off the table, get into the new year, try and govern a bit and actually show some stability. So I think Shapps has moved a lot as well.
Well, the reality is the government are very, very weak at the moment, and they're being absolutely held to account by the unions, and it's not a really safe way to go. And the sooner we stop politicising and going, for the NHS as a sacred cow, the better. I mean, it's losing money. It's never been funded more than it has been at the moment. It's completely mismanaged in terms of money, in terms of IT infrastructure is prehistoric. I mean, it's Jurassic at worst. And, then we're missing out in the 2019 target of having 6,000 more GPs, and we've only got 4,200. And why aren't young doctors wanting to go into general practice? Look at the headlines. Who would want to touch it?
Yeah, we talked about it a lot yesterday, and a lot kind of get to junior level, and then they go somewhere else as well.
Yes.
So, we talked about that
it's
yesterday.
The retention, of staff. And who cares for the carers,
Yeah. John, front of the Express, tell us more about what the Express is reporting. Migrant worker claims sexual assault at migrant camp.
Well, this is an extraordinary story. It's about a riot. And we know what happens in riots. There's violence, there's sexual violence, in this case, a sexual assault. But if you go into the detail of this story, it turns out that the government refused, I think it was Jenrick at the time was the relevant minister, refused to evacuate the migrant camp when there was power cuts, and that is when all the trouble kicked off. So the detail of the story is in a way almost as bad as the front page headline. There was a riot, there was sexual assault, the place was out of control, and the government had refused to evacuate. In fact, actually, Robert Jenrick had tweeted that thankfully nobody got hurt in this disturbance. He's had to clarify, staff had to clarify, he didn't know the full range of what was going on, but what you wonder is, it sounds like asleep at the wheel. If there's going to be danger, evacuate people to keep people safe. Migrants need to be kept safe. Like they're in the care of the UK until their cases are decided. So it's a terrible, terrible story for the government. And one more sense that the government aren't in control. They can't do the basics. If you can't keep law and order in one of your own facilities, how can you keep a law and order on the streets? And we're going to come to that a bit later.
And reports as well that guards were threatened as well in this disturbance, in what the Express is calling turf wars at this migrant centre.
All the people I know who work with migrants know there's always a danger of violence with some of the people who are involved. You need to keep the order, and in this case they lost control.
Where is this camp that this happened?
Is it?
Where?
Well, it's like centre. It's more it's a centre in Hillingdon.
It's the Hillingdon,
northwest London.
Right.
Yeah.
Near the airport.
Yeah. Claire, you wanted to talk as well about this shooting in central London in Euston, which has left one girl fighting for her life, 7-year-old girl.
I mean, Ellie and I, remember the Corbell girl, Olivia Corbell, we were on that next day talking about that, the tragic girl in Liverpool who got shot when her mother opened the door, crossfire, collateral damage. I am shocked this. I read the headlines last night.
They were at a funeral.
Girl 7 shot in drive-by at funeral.
Yeah.
The funeral was of a single mother and her daughter. Daughter, I think, died of leukemia, or the mother did, or whatever. Shot in very, very sad circumstances. The funeral was held in a Catholic church near Euston Station in Keir Starmer's constituency.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And at the release of doves after the funeral service, after the Requiem Mass, a masked man open fired against these mourners, and I'm finding it very difficult to talk about it because it's you just don't believe that this can happen on your back garden, really. I mean, what has Sadiq Khan done to London? What is London doing to itself? We've got gun crime, the highest gun crime ever, the knife crime as well. It seems to be completely lawless. You were talking about the sexual assault complaint at Hellingdon Migrant Centre. That in itself is bad enough as an isolated event, but this now transferred onto our streets is appalling.
Well, it seems the only people who the Metropolitan Police can use their force against are women demonstrating against violence against women.
Yes,
It's
a
an
good
extraordinary
point.
situation where the basic task of policing is failing. Young men are being stabbed. Mourners are being shot, women are being sexually assaulted, older people are being the victims of cybercrime, and the cops will give you a police number. That's all they'll do.
I get your point, but I don't think it's the police. I don't think it's the Met Police's fault that this is happening. I mean, I think there's definitely something wrong in society whereby people think this is acceptable behaviour on any form.
I suppose the thing is that with gang crime, we know that you have to infiltrate gangs. There's a war of intelligence. You have to find ways to stop the small arms trade. You have to find ways to stop the guns circulating. So if you're not cracking down on gang violence, this feels like it's a gang violence.
I think it's drug related. I think the gangs and drugs are very closely related. Not saying any of the victims have anything to do with that.
They're trying to send a message out to the people doing this, as saying we control the streets, not the police.
Not the police. It's just horrendous.
Yeah, we imagine we'll get an update from the Met Police later today and with more details, and hopefully that little girl and the woman who's also in hospital pull through. John, you wanted to talk about Keir Starmer's plans for the NHS. He's made some announcements.
Well,
these are quite interesting.
He's basically
reforming the NHS.
He's quoting Claire, echoing Claire, isn't he? Saying the NHS can't be a sacred cow. It's not the envy of the world. We must stop pretending that. And that there's some changes, and he's building on some of the things that Wes Streeting has been saying. And one thing I think the new year has shown you is that Labour and Labour frontbenchers and the leader, Keir Starmer, look and sound more like a potential government, an alternative government. And what was he saying here? Very sensible things. Wes Streeting has said, if women coming into medicine don't want to be partners and run a business as a GP, let's make them salaried. And Keir's saying, if you have a chronic condition and you want to see a consultant, why do you have to go to a GP? You know your chronic condition. Most people with chronic conditions understand what's going on. They know when they need to see somebody. So some of these changes, more customer facing, more friendly, more facilitative, helping patients. But the big thing is, he will cut the crap, and I think that's a good message to have from a Labour leader, an opposition leader, and I hope that pushes the government to respond as well.
It's such a fascinating time, though, isn't it, John, at the moment, where Labour has to sound right. It has to be giving the right impression to would-be Labour voters, to the Red Wall. It's that kind of time, 18 months before an election, but they don't want to be giving away their best ideas. It's such a fine balance.
It's so difficult. It's so difficult. When you're in opposition, Tony Blair used to say this, when you're in opposition, all you can do is talk. Or you get up every morning and say, what am I going to say? In government, you get up and think, what am I going to do? And yes, it is a worry. You have an idea, it gets stolen by the government. But it does also mean that you're making the weather. You're determining the frame of ideas, the way that people think of solving things. And that's when the Red Wall voters, other voters, look at you and go, actually, you're safe. You're safe to be a government again. I think that's and the fact that Keir Starmer has written a column for the Sunday Telegraph. He's not put this into the Observer.
Absolutely.
He's gone to the Sunday Telegraph.
It's in the Telegraph, and it's kind of cutting bureaucracy, changing the way the NHS is managed. Very similar to what the Conservatives are saying as well.
Would like to say, but we've got Steve Barclay trying to work for the unions.
Yeah.
So
what's going on? They're trading places.
Exactly, trading places.
Listen, guys, we're going to have to leave it there, but it is National Pothole Day, so merry potholeness to
Well, there we are. But you'll be back with us, won't you, throughout the programme, so lots more to come.
Exactly.